Hello and welcome to New Filmmakers Los Angeles in partnership with Movie Maker magazine. My name is Danny DeLillo and we're here at the Cambridge Los Angeles show in West Hollywood, and I'm here with writer and director John Klein with his movie Cry It Out. Let's take a look at a clip. John, welcome and thank you so much for Cry It Out. It was absolutely brilliant. But for those that haven't seen it, tell us a brief synopsis of your film.
So Cry It Out is the elevator pitch I always give. It's a short horror film about a baby monitor. It's about a newly minted father named Martin who is home alone with his one-year-old son for the first time as his wife goes to see a friend of hers. And as any new parent deals with, he has to try and get his son to sleep at night and kind of sleep train him a little bit. And over the course of that, he starts to hear really terrifying things and have these frightening visions precipitated by noises he hears in the baby monitor. And so it's him trying to deal with the prospect of being a dad and what that means to him. And it's kind of the thing that every parent goes through is, am I going to be a good parent? And it's just manifest in very, very terrifying ways in this movie.
It really is a wonderful story. Like, firstly, I now have a phobia of baby monitors myself after watching this. Like, literally, that's how it leaves you. And secondly, you know, I really, from frame to frame, I did not know what was going to happen next, which was just so fascinating. Where did the inspiration come for you in making the film?
The inspiration's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, I woke up one night at like 4 in the morning to the sound of the baby monitor, thinking that my son was awake. And when I went into the bedroom to check and see if he was awake, he was fast asleep. And so the baby monitor was just kind of doing its own thing.
Oh, wow.
Which they do sometimes. Sometimes they'll just hear noises. Maybe, you know, if there's a storm, they'll hear the rain. You'll hear them go off. And in that moment, and over the course of, you know, several months of being a stay-at-home dad for the first year of my son's life, you get very sleep deprived. You get very frustrated by, you know, why can't I get my son to sleep? Why can't I get my son to stop crying? You know, any number of things. And then my wife, who I love dearly, has a bit of a creep fest when it comes to my films. She always suggests what winds up being the creepiest part of the movie. And so
it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, you betcha. She wound up being the one who suggested, because we were trying to come up with kind of what the rules of the supernatural element of the ghost, whatever it was. And as I was writing it, she was like, what if the ghost is this apparition of his dead wife, sort of come to tell him he's not doing a good job and he needs to step it up.
Yeah.
And that was what kind of escalated the whole thing and took it into another sort of thematic realm for me. Because I feel like horror, when you're making a horror film, you're trying to take something that scares you. You're trying to take your greatest fears and make them relatable and universal, but also make them real and tangible in some way. And for me, like as a parent, one of my greatest fears was what happens if I have to do this alone suddenly.
Right.
What happens if one day my wife is just gone?
Yeah.
And that was something that I wanted to mine very much for this. It was like, what happens when suddenly you're faced with the possibility that you're a single parent? That's terrifying on its own. Yeah. And then taking it to, you know, taking it to 11.
11, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's fascinating to just to have that concept in it alone, the fact that obviously, you know, you were taking care of your child, but then obviously, you know, this other element of which there's this kind of horror element, and who knew baby monitors was so scary? Like, oh my goodness me, like I will never look at a baby monitor the same way again, thanks to you.
Yeah,
but you know, which is mission accomplished. But you know, aside from that as well, like you know, what's fascinating also is that what you may not know is that John actually used the young little actor baby was actually your own son. What was that experience like?
You know, it was obviously terrifying, but it was also amazing because the hardest thing, I mean, they tell you when you're a director, don't work with kids, don't work with animals. I mean, if we'd had a dog in this movie, then I could have done the trifecta.
Yeah.
But for working with Donnie, what was great, first of all, my wife was on set every single day.
That's great.
And my mother came on set for the second weekend of filming, and she was helping out as well. So it was
family
it
affair.
was great to have, to have the entire family helping out with kind of corralling him. But what was great was that we kind of, what makes your own kid tick. And so we knew how to get him to do certain things, how to get him to laugh or to cry if we needed him to cry. And sometimes that was just as simple as, we're going to look at him, we're going to make sure he's got his eye line, like for camera, and then we'll just leave the room. And if we left the room, he would start crying because he would be like, I'm in a room with a lot of equipment and people
what's
I don't
going
really
on?
know. And that's horrible. Like as a parent, it's like you're trying to get your son to cry on camera, and you're just like, you're just by the monitor, like, God, I gotta get this shot, but this is horrible.
Yeah.
And so, it was a real challenge in that respect. But because we kind of knew how to get him to do certain things, and God bless our actors, both Timmy and Kate, who play Martin and Karen, the husband and wife in the film, they came over before we started filming. They came over to my house and would kind of interact with him and get him comfortable. And then between every single take, if Timmy was like, do I have 5 minutes? And I was like, yeah, you got 5 minutes, we're setting up. So, okay, I'm gonna go play with Donnie for a little bit. Just to get him comfortable with it. So there's moments when, Donnie is reaching for him and stuff like that. I mean, that was because Timmy put in all this extra effort to make sure that Donnie was comfortable and would treat him the same way he treats me in some respect. Like,
you could really tell they were father and son. It really came across so amazingly well. And it was, I'm not gonna spoil the ending, but it was emotional, not the very last take, which you'll find out, but the when she returned, whatever, it's just, it was a really beautiful, like, oh, you're here, what was the biggest challenge for you?
There were challenges, I want to say, but at the same time, I felt like I had the best crew. It wasn't even close. It's the best crew I've ever worked with by a nautical mile, but also everything just kind of worked. Like, I mean, there are these serendipitous moments. There's a shot in the film where Martin barges into the bedroom, and it's a shot of the crib and Martin in the background, and both are in. We did this like split diopter thing, both of them are in focus. And the first time we did that take, and Donnie has a very specific nap schedule, so we had like 2 hours to get the entire series of shots where he's sleeping. He opened his eyes on the first take and looked right into the camera. And both Bill and I just sort of like Jurassic Park style, like his vision is based on movement, don't move, and we just stop everything and we're like, shh. Shh. And he just slowly closes his eyes back to sleep. And Timmy didn't know any of that. He just went through the take, and then he did a second take, and his eyes stayed closed. And that both of those takes made it into the film. Opening his eyes and looking straight at us is a creepy shot, because babies can also be pretty creepy. So there were all these little serendipitous things that happened that just somehow worked. And so from a challenge perspective, there weren't huge challenges, but I would say for me, just the challenge was, just from a storytelling perspective, was modulating and letting the build happen just slow enough. Like I love horror. Not everybody loves horror, and so I wanted to ease the audience into it a little bit. So like there's like 5 to 10 minutes before anything scary happens, really. And so building up to that slowly, establishing the relationship between Martin and Oliver, and establishing who he is and why he's kind of this reluctant father figure. And then building up to that, because then I find like it's a heck of a lot scarier. Like you said, it's a lot scarier when you think something's going to happen to the baby. It's a lot scarier when you worry about where Martin's head is at, and like character-wise, it's just horror movies are more effective when you care about the characters and when you care about the backstory of what's going on, because then it's less jump scary, and it's more dread that you feel.
And what was something that you because you come from a cinematography background as well. Now that has a whole different like experience in the horror genre. The way that the shots that you make, the way you move the camera, and there's so many moments, and you can certainly tell that's your background, because there are so many moments in there where the way that you've used the camera and moved the camera, you're really taking us on this unexpected journey of where we're going to go. What sort of things, as from a cinematographer perspective, do you take into account for things like horror films? What do you sort of do?
Part of the reason that I love the horror genre is I feel like it's the one bastion in filmmaking where you can just break rules and play, and like you play with color. You want this to be blue? let's do
Yeah.
blue.
Yeah.
Let's put some red paint on the wall, whatever it is. Like, you can do whatever you want. And that was part of the influences we had when we were thinking about the visual style of the film. We talked about movies like The Babadook and the way that they use very wide-angle lenses, even for like close-up shots, where you feel like everything's a little distorted.
Yeah.
We talked about Dario Argento movies, which are so rife with color, saturated color.
Yeah.
And so we wanted the blood to be extra red, and we wanted the walls to have this extra blue. Nighttime was very blue for us, and like that's something you always have to ask yourself as a cinematographer: is like, what color is nighttime? Because that carries a very different mood depending on what the color is. So from that perspective, like, having a cinematography background and then bringing Bill on as a cinematographer. Bill and I have worked together in many capacities over the years, and we have a very similar style of filmmaking to one another.
So you understand each other.
But he had never worked as my cinematographer when I was a director.
Got it.
But for us to have the same sort of eyes for what we wanted and how we wanted to go about things, and have the same sort of movies that we could reference back and forth with one another.
Team is everything.
Yeah, and then so that was something where my cinematography background, I could draw on that, but I had so much trust in Bill as a cinematographer that I was able to, for the first time really, because I have trouble doing that on other films of mine, let the cinematography side of me go a little bit and just let him play in that world.
Yeah. Well, it's nice when you've got the same vision. You trust that person to do so. What's it like to have your film selected for New Filmmakers LA and have it selected in front of a huge audience? What does that feel like?
I went to the screening last night, and it was the first time that I've seen the film with that large of an audience. I think that was the most exciting thing for me is to see, like, because there are people there for several different short films.
Yeah.
And to be the only horror film in that block of short films was also great, because like there's these kind of fun comedies and these little kind of dramas that they have, like. There was such a diversity of talent in there, and I joked with one of the filmmakers during the Q&A that it was like my film was sort of this weird, twisted, alternate universe sequel to his movie, but that's the fun of being paired with other films in a festival, is that you get to see your film through different lenses, and you could see that in the audience reaction, that there were times when the audience would laugh, but they weren't sure if they were still supposed to be laughing, because like the first 5 minutes are kind of funny. You're with Donnie, he's being silly, he's being a baby, and then weird stuff starts happening, and you're wondering is this still a comedy? Like, I'm not sure. And I love doing that to people, but for doing that sort of thing in the venue of New Filmmakers is awesome, because you guys champion those kinds of diverse talents and those kind of diverse stories.
Yeah, no, most definitely. You certainly did that for me. Like, I'm like, am I supposed to laugh right now? That this is going gets a bit creepy again, and then it gets a bit soft and cute, and it's you did do that to me as well. So I certainly did that to our audience last night. What is next for you, John?
Right now, my production company, Glass City Films, we kind of ran this through that. We are in post-production on a film called Limerence that will probably be released at the end of the year. Similar sort of length, like 30 minutes or so. Very surreal, completely unlike this film in terms of mood and tone and story, but very awesome. We raised money through Kickstarter on that last year and had a really good time making that. And then I'm a teacher, so I'm still teaching at DePaul and Tribeca Flashpoint in Chicago. I love teaching. It's kind of like my second love. Yeah. And then I keep writing. I'm still trying to, I think, find my voice as a filmmaker. I love this genre. It is, and it's not something you're even necessarily aware of. Like you write a story or you find a screenplay that grabs you. And you don't necessarily know why, and it's your job as a director to find out why it grabs you, and then try to get that feeling imposed on other people, and try to get them as excited about it as you are. And that's something where I'm trying to figure out, what is it I want to say as a filmmaker. And I think with Cry It Out, it was my first step towards, what do I really want to say going forward with other films as well, whether it's about being a parent or about certain values that I have, like how do I want to bring that across? So that's my goal right now, is I'm starting to write more, and I'm starting to try and figure out what else I want to direct going forward.
I think it's really great that you said something about about teaching. Like, it's one of those industries where you never stop learning yourself, but you never stop wanting to support others and mentor others, and you're constantly a mentor and a mentee.
And that's something too where I talk about this, like being a teacher, being a professor has made me a better cinematographer, and it's made me a better director, because either I've seen students work and I thought, my God, that's amazing. Like I couldn't do that. Like how did they do that? And also refreshing and figuring out, okay, well, I need to explain this to somebody in a way they can understand this concept or this editing technique or whatever it is. And by having to articulate that effectively, I now know as a director how I can articulate that in my own work going forward. And I can also figure out, I can find new examples of things to teach in class, and I can learn from those examples. So it's been great for me to kind of hone my craft strangely through being a teacher. Now that I'm no longer a student.
It's brilliant. We're always going to be a student deep down, aren't we?
Yes,
Learning,
of course.
you know. So no, well, listen, John, I love your films. I really do, and welcome back, alumni of New Filmmakers LA. So thank you for coming to visit us, and we look forward to seeing much more of your work. So thank you.
Thank you.